we're going to do our best to summarize a geopolitical analysis of the year 2024, which was a year of clear transformation in the world order, in the global order. 2024 marked a period of fundamental transformations in the global geopolitical landscape. The events that took place during this year have redefined international relations, altered regional power balances, and also established new paradigms in global politics. This analysis delves into the developments that seem most significant and their implications for the future of the international order. And we're going to start with the BRICS and the new multipolar order. The year began with an event that marked a significant shift in the global balance of power. Here we're referring to the inclusion of Egypt, Ethiopia, the United Arab Emirates, and also Iran into the BRICS bloc on January 1st. This strategic expansion significantly strengthened the influence of the bloc, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, representing a direct challenge to the international order led by the West. The inclusion of these new members not only increased the economic weight of the bloc, but also expanded its geopolitical influence in strategic regions. And now, of course, we have to talk about the crisis in the Middle East. And first, obviously, about what's happening in Gaza. The conflict in Gaza reached unprecedented levels following the Israeli offensive that began in January in response to the events of October 7th, 2023. The humanitarian consequences, unfortunately, have been devastating, with over 40,000 direct casualties reported. Netanyahu's administration, although it didn't achieve significant progress in the release of hostages, intensified its operations against targets linked to Iran, adding a new dimension to the regional conflict. And what happened in the Red Sea? The Bab el-Mandeb Strait became a focal point of international tension when the Houthis intensified their attacks on commercial and military vessels. These attacks, justified by them as support for the Palestinian cause, prompted a coordinated military response from the US, Israel, and their allies. These attacks, seen as support for the Palestinian cause, prompted a military response. The crisis impacted global trade routes and supply chains, Israel and its allies. The consequences of this crisis extended beyond the military realm, significantly affecting global maritime trade routes and international supply chains. And now, what happened in Syria? Are we talking about the end of an era? The collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime in November marked a historic turning point. The progressive loss of support from its traditional allies, which we know were Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, critically weakened its position. The capture of Damascus by the HTS group, led by Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani in a 2-week lightning offensive, has ushered in a period of uncertain political transition that could fundamentally reconfigure the power map in the Middle East. And what about the conflict between Lebanon and Israel? The elimination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, followed by the Israeli invasion of Lebanon until November, marked a significant escalation in the conflict. And what about the conflict between Lebanon and Israel? The elimination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, followed by the Israeli invasion of Lebanon until November, marked a significant escalation in the conflict. Even though a ceasefire was established, the underlying tensions continue to threaten regional stability And now let's head over to Europe. What political transformations and challenges can we observe? Let's start with the elections to the European Parliament. The European elections revealed a complex reality. While the pro-European parties effectively maintained the majority, the growing political fragmentation and the rise of movements labeled as Eurosceptic pose significant challenges to the governance and cohesion of the bloc. This tension between pro-European and anti-European forces significantly defines a new chapter in the history of European integration. And what happens? What happened, or rather in the United Kingdom, there was a significant political shift. The return of the Labour Party to power, after years of conservative rule, significantly marks a turning point in post-Brexit British politics. This change suggests a possible recalibration in the relations between London and Brussels, although within the parameters set by the UK's exit from the European Union. And what about Romania? What's going on in Romania? There's already a democratic crisis. The annulment of the Romanian elections due to allegations of Russian interference creates persistent vulnerabilities in European democratic processes. This incident raised concerns about external influence in electoral processes and the need to strengthen democratic protection mechanisms in Eastern Europe. Now let's head over to Latin America, where new leaderships have emerged, along with various democratic challenges. Let's start with the consolidation of new political models. What are we referring to? Naturally, to El Salvador. Nayib Bukele's re-election in El Salvador solidifies his governance style, raising authoritarian trend questions. The victory shows support for his security approach, though it raises democratic concerns. And what's going on in Mexico? The electoral victory reflects significant popular support for his approach to public security, although it raises concerns about the state of democratic institutions. And what's going on in Mexico? A historic milestone, the election of Claudia Sheinbaum as the first female president of Mexico, marks a historic moment for female representation in Latin American politics. Her victory represented not just a symbolic change, but also the continuation of the political project started by her predecessor, Mr. AMLO. And what about Venezuela? No, the situation in Venezuela is deteriorating significantly. After elections, widely regarded as fraudulent, Nicolas Maduro's continued hold on power and the exile of the opposition candidate, Mr. Edmundo Gonzalez, to Madrid, Spain, highlight the deepening democratic crisis in that country and the ongoing challenges for institutional recovery. And now let's go much further. Let's head over to Asia, 2000. There are new regional dynamics over there. And naturally, we're going to South Korea. The declaration of martial law by President Yoon Suk-yeol in November, in response to tensions with the opposition, triggered massive protests that questioned the political stability of his country. This unexpected development in one of the most established democracies in Asia raised serious concerns in several countries. It generated international concern. And wrapping up, with Asia, there's a Sino-Indian rapprochement. The border agreement between China and India represents a significant development in the bilateral relations between these two Asian powers. However, the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea suggest that strategic competition in the region is going to persist. And now let's go to Africa. There's a reconfiguration of influence over there. Let's talk about the new Silk Roads in Africa. China has consolidated its presence on the continent through the Belt and Road Initiative with significant investments in infrastructure and trade. This expansion and Chinese influence have fundamentally altered the economic and political dynamics on that continent. And what was the Western response? USA intensified its efforts to counter Chinese influence through strategic projects like the Lobito Corridor in Angola. Meanwhile, the withdrawal of French troops from Senegal and Chad marked the end of an era of direct European influence on the continent. And how are we going to wrap up this reflection? 2024 witnessed fundamental transformations in the global order. Conflicts in the Middle East indicate a multipolar future. International stability is fragile, raising questions about global evolution. More multipolar and complex. International stability remains fragile, and developments in 2024 raise significant questions about the evolution of the global regime. The ability of the international community to manage these changes and promote peace will be crucial in determining the course of international relations in the years to come. Emerging challenges, from the climate crisis to the proliferation of regional conflicts, require renewed and effective international cooperation. Success in tackling these challenges will depend on the ability of global actors to overcome differences and work towards common goals in an increasingly interconnected and complex world. Now, don't think I forgot about Ukraine. I wanted to save it for last, not because it's any less important. The conflict in Ukraine has entered a phase of stalemate. That's exactly why I saved it for last. It has entered a phase of strategic stalemate. Throughout 2024, despite the expectations generated by the Ukrainian counteroffensive the previous year, the front lines remained relatively stable. The war of attrition continued to significantly affect both sides, with an increasingly high human and material cost. Western support for Ukraine experienced significant fluctuations during the year. Difficulties in approving new aid packages in the US Congress, and the growing debate in Europe about the sustainability of military and economic support created uncertainty about Kiev's ability to sustain its war effort in the long run. The conflict continued to be a testing ground for military innovation. The massive use of drones and autonomous systems by both sides transformed the nature of the battlefield. Ukraine showed particular skill in developing unmanned naval attack capabilities, achieving significant successes against the Russian fleet in the Black Sea. The economic consequences of the conflict continued to resonate globally. The prolonged disruption of Ukrainian agricultural exports kept pressure on global food markets, particularly affecting countries in Africa and the Middle East that rely on these imports. Diplomatic efforts to find a negotiated solution to the conflict did not yield significant progress. Mediation proposals from various international actors faced resistance from both Moscow and Kiev, with both sides holding fundamentally incompatible positions on territorial and security issues. The conflict continued to have significant repercussions in the region. Moldova faced rising tensions related to the separatist region of Transnistria, while the Baltic countries and Poland ramped up their defensive preparations. In light of a persistent Russian threat,